Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I want to look at the weekend of August the 2nd and 3rd, 2025. I also, I'm afraid, want to look at the horoscope of Meghan Markle, very briefly. I mean, it is her birthday on Monday, on August the 4th. Also, it's Barack Obama's birthday. So, maybe I'll talk about Barack Obama on Monday, but I'll talk about Meghan in this video. I'm not going to say a great deal about her, but it has come to my notice that she is getting more attention, and part of that might be the fact that her deal with Netflix is has run its course, or at least that's how it seems, and additionally. Martha Stewart has made some comments about her, and that's kind of interesting as well because it's Martha Stewart's birthday this weekend. She was born on August the 3rd, 1941. So her birthday is the day before Meghan's, and so the two women sort of are born almost exactly 40 years apart. But, before I talk about Meghan, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is the weekend, well, not today, it's just for the whole weekend. And so we'll be looking at the weekend of August the 2nd and 3rd, and here is the horoscope for this weekend. So set for midnight on Sunday, August the 3rd, New York time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So, halfway through the weekend, the moon is getting ready to move into Sagittarius. So, if you are in Europe, then certainly in London, at 7 in the morning on Sunday, the moon does switch signs and moves into Sagittarius. So you could say that sort of Saturday is all about the moon being in Scorpio. Then Sunday is maybe a very different day. So Saturday, if the moon is moving through late Scorpio, then the moon is not doing a huge amount. It's making a sextile to Mars at the end of Saturday. So really, that's what Saturday is about. So as Saturday progresses, we've got that sextile Mars becomes stronger, but it's not necessarily a hugely important aspect, the sextile to Mars, but it does provide a bit of energy, and then the moon moves into Sagittarius, and so we've got a lot of outer planets in early degrees. So when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes an opposition to Uranus in Gemini, then it makes a trine to Saturn and trine to Neptune, and then a sextile to Pluto, and finally the moon makes a trine to Mercury. So those are some of the lunar aspects. On Saturday, we get a couple of non-lunar aspects. We get Mercury making a decile to Venus. Mercury and Venus will be 36 degrees apart. Mercury-Venus decile is about maybe the struggle to make the most of ourselves and the struggle to find our inner artist. Perhaps, we can do something that can be of creative value, but we'll have to work on it, and we'll have to do our best to bring our true selves out into the open. And additionally, we've got Venus quincunx Pluto. So Venus at 3 degrees Cancer, making 2 or 3 degrees Cancer, making quincunx to Pluto. So that can be quite an uneasy aspect. But it's not just about Saturday. I think Sunday we're going to feel that quincunx as well. And so the way we relate may not always be easy. And we try to be warm and sensitive and emotional, but there are other things going on, quite heavy heavy events, or maybe just heavy concerns, sort of strong feelings about what is happening. So that is the picture for sort of midnight on Sunday New York time. If midnight on Sunday, sort of in Sydney, as a representative of Australia or New Zealand, you can see that the moon is still very much in Scorpio. So if you're in Australasia, I would have said that the moon is not going to move into Sagittarius until this afternoon or early evening. So if you're in Australia, it's sort of more of a Scorpio weekend, and perhaps that sextile between the moon and Mars, becomes more important. Sort of, kind of dominates the weekend, and then right at the end, the moon will change sign, and you'll get moon opposition Uranus, and the moon making aspects to outer planets. There is a bit of a difference in emphasis between the Americas and Australasia. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, where of course it should be, and we still have that Mars Chiron opposition, sort of Mars 24 Libra opposition Chiron at 24 Aries. So there are things we want to do. We want to sort of get on with it. We want to perhaps assert ourselves, and there may be sort of that energy in general going on around us, but it's not always easy, and we might feel that circumstances are just preventing us from doing what we want to do, and as a result we might have to try extra hard. I think we can. I mean, one of the main aspects of a weekend is geocentrically is moon sextile Mars, and so moon sextile Mars, what's that, sort of moon in Scorpio, sextile Mars in Virgo. If we get the planning right, maybe we can make an impact, but it might require a bit of work there. So those are a few thoughts about the heliocentric picture, or at least just one thought, and I now want to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of August the 2nd and 3rd, 2025. Aries. Saturday might be rather different than Sunday. Saturday, Aries, might be a day when you are looking after yourself, and you have a keen awareness of your own self-interest. What is important to you, and what do you have to look after, and you might not be in the mood for doing anything that is unplanned or spontaneous. Yeah, I mean, I know that Aries is a spontaneous sign, but on Saturday, I'm not convinced that you're going to feel particularly spontaneous. There are perhaps things that have to be done, and you want to do it, in your own way, and you maybe don't even want other people to know what you're up to. Perhaps it's just a matter of being secretive, or you're not convinced that people are going to respond very well to you. So if that's the way you feel, that's fine. And with this sextile between the moon and Mars, I think that Saturday can still be a very useful day, and it's just important that everything is done on your own terms, and don't forget your own health. I mean, it does matter, your health, and sometimes Aries can sort of run ahead of itself, can sort of think that it needs to just act. Let's not worry too much about the body. but on Saturday maybe you can sort of slow down to an extent, and and if you make the effort, I think you'll just get a natural feeling for what's good for you and what's bad for you, and how best to align yourself to your mind and your body, and they will have to sort of work together, don't they? Not to mention the spirit, and so don't allow yourself to be pushed, and because fundamentally you understand your own pace. Now there is a change. We do have the moon moving into Sagittarius on Sunday. This, sort of course, will take place sort of fairly early in the morning, at 7 o'clock in the morning if you're in the UK. Earlier, sort of in the night if you're in the Americas, or if you're in California. In fact, very late on Saturday, the moon will move into Sagittarius, sort of 11 p.m. So, moon moving into Sagittarius does create a change, and it's moon moving into a fire sign, and so you might have more energy, and you'll be ready for action. You'll be able to do things which only a few days ago you weren't really prepared to contemplate. So Sunday is a more active day. Now that doesn't mean that you should sort of go rushing around here, there, and everywhere. The moon makes an opposition to Uranus. So that's the first aspect the moon makes as it enters Sagittarius, and so So your first impulse on Sunday, may not be the best impulse, and perhaps you should sort of wait it out and allow the moon to, the moon then moves on. It makes a trine to Saturn, and then a trine to Mercury. In fact, on Sunday we got a grand trine in fire signs: Moon in Sagittarius, Mercury in Leo, and Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So that could really allow you to sort of get things together, and you can be not just motivated but also be quite disciplined about it. And additionally, Aries, you might sort of get in touch with some sort of collective force. Remember, there's this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, and sometimes it's a problem. Saturn can be about restriction. Neptune can be about confusion, and you're trying to work it all out. And maybe this grand trine can allow you to take something that you don't fully understand and to make it happen, to make it a central part of your life, or at the very least to just understand it. And so overall, Aries, I'm thinking that Sunday is going to probably be a more interesting day than Saturday. Taurus, there are things happening, things are changing. We've got the moon changing sign. You've got the moon moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, and of course, when the moon is in Scorpio, it's in your opposite sign, and so it's moon in Scorpio. Therefore, can have some relevance to relationships. I mean, that is the nature of nature of the opposite sign. It's everything that you are not, Scorpio, and it can represent the other. And the moon, while it's moving through Scorpio, it does make a sextile to Mars, and so moon sextile Mars, we could say that says something about relationships and perhaps how you can get on with people. I think you can get on with people, and you can enjoy their company. So if you want to do something fun, perhaps on Saturday, I think that you can. Though it might be a situation where you have to allow another person to take the lead. As far as you're concerned, you won't be quite sure what's going on, and you will maybe have some reserve. Which yes, I've said relationships can work on Saturday, but we do have to consider the fact that Venus, your ruler, is making a quincunx to Pluto. So that does make it somewhat difficult for you to be completely relaxed, not just on Saturday but on Sunday as well. And it may not be that anyone is bothering you, or that you're necessarily playing power games, or someone else is playing power games. It just could be that you just feel that you should be somewhere else, and that you should be doing something serious, something of importance. And this relates to the fact that Pluto's in Aquarius. Pluto is in quite an ambitious part of your chart, and you're still getting used to Pluto in Aquarius. I mean, I know that Pluto's been in Aquarius for the best part of a year, but sometimes it can be difficult. Venus in Cancer, does want to relax. Venus is, of course, your ruler. Venus in Cancer just wants to relax and be itself and enjoy other people's company. But there is something bothering you. There's something that you feel that you should be doing, and that might be a good thing. A bit of tension can work in your favor, and so you ask yourself, what is it? What exactly do you need to do? And maybe you should just do it, and maybe it won't take as long as you'd imagine. You get it out of the way, and then things are fine, and then you can then you can move on and perhaps start enjoying the weekend. Though the moon does change sign. It moves into Sagittarius, and your moon moving into Sagittarius, well, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, on the face of it, it's not necessarily a good thing, because Sagittarius is a sign that is very different from your own sign. Taurus likes to keep things fairly straightforward, and sometimes you just don't want to be bothered, and you don't want too many surprises. And moon in Sagittarius can be about you perhaps recognizing that it is a complicated world, and that things can happen that you hadn't planned for. But there is a saving grace here, and that is the fact that the moon, when it moves into Sagittarius, is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So the moon is in Jupiter's sign in Sagittarius. Jupiter is in the moon's sign. Jupiter is in Cancer, and so it could be said that the moon moving into Sagittarius is actually sort of quite empowering. It reminds you of what you can do, and also of the real strength of your feelings. So however complicated things are on Sunday, and Monday as well, it does stay in Sagittarius for a couple of days. However complicated things are, you can certainly deal with it. And at the same time, Taurus, you can get in touch with your hidden power, some of the things that you keep secret. You're afraid of revealing it because you don't know what's going to happen. But now is the time to start to harness all of that. At first it might not be easy. The moon does make an opposition to Uranus, and that opposition to Uranus might be disturbing, because you see that things are complicated, and you're not always in control. And additionally, moon in Sagittarius may say something about money and your attitude to money, and how other people treat money. And so if financial issues come up on Sunday and into Monday, they may take up a lot of time, and in the first instance may not feel as if they're anything you want to bother with. But you have the strength because of that mutual reception between the moon and Jupiter. And additionally, there's a grand trine. The moon is making a trine to Saturn and a trine to Mercury, and so perhaps, Taurus, you'll really start to sort of understand what is happening, and you can start to understand things at a deeper psychological level, and that could be of benefit. Gemini. At first, the weekend may not seem, very interesting. I mean, it feels like you don't really want to engage, not particularly. That's your first thought. You would you'd rather just sort of disappear, or at least just be somewhere where you felt safe, where you were in control, where you knew the rules. And so your first inclination is to be not particularly sociable. I mean, why bother? It's just not worth the effort. But I think it would be a shame if you just took a completely negative attitude. There are certainly things certainly on Saturday, there's a lot you can do if you can be bothered, and perhaps you can't be bothered. But if you start getting things together and deciding, you decide what matters, then things will start to shape up, and you'll then realize that there is something to be done, and you'll be very grateful that you've had the awareness to see what needs to be finished, or what needs to be attended to, because you'll be grateful because you'll realize that, well, if you didn't do it on Saturday, when would you do it? And so if you are spending Saturday on your own, or with sort of at least restricted company, then that means that you can take advantage of the situation, and you don't have to worry too much about outside pressure. And additionally, you can make your own decisions, and you can make your own world. And one aspect we have on Saturday, for example, is a decile between Mercury and Venus. And so a decile is, it's 1/10 of the circle 36 degrees, and it's what you can create, with your own effort. And for example, even though you might not be feeling particularly sociable, if you were to make a special effort to get on with someone or to reach out to someone, it might all be very contrived. But if you can do that, it might all be surprisingly successful. And don't forget your own talent. Being a Gemini, of course, you're a very talented person, and sometimes you can not have the consistency to see your talent through. You get distracted. But with this Mercury decile Venus, it does seem that you can really think about what you can do, and start to work on it, and put it into action, and additionally even tell people about it. And okay, maybe not on Saturday, but perhaps on Sunday. Now, talking about Sunday, there is a sign change. The moon moves out of Scorpio and into Sagittarius. So in other words, the moon moves into your opposite sign. And the first thing that happens when the moon moves into Sagittarius is it makes an opposition to Uranus. So you've got Uranus in Gemini, and the moon is going to be opposition Uranus. And so that can say something about relationships and what they're all about. And you are reminded that Uranus is in Gemini. So Uranus went into Gemini quite recently. I think it went into Gemini on July the 7th. And so, with Uranus in Gemini, you are an individual. There's a real reminder that you're an individual. Geminis are always an individual, but more so than usual with Uranus in Gemini. And of course, Uranus stays in Gemini. Uranus does briefly go back into Taurus later in the year, but by and large, Uranus is staying in Gemini for the next 7 years or so. And so your individuality counts. But then Moon is opposition Sagittarius. Moon is opposition Uranus, and with that opposition, your individuality may conflict with outside pressure. Maybe other people want to do stuff, and you don't like it. You just want to keep doing what you're doing. And timing is important. On Saturday, before the moon moves into Sagittarius, by all means keep doing what you're doing. But on Sunday, do try to be more flexible. The moon, when it moves into Sagittarius, it does make a mutual reception to Jupiter. And so, with that mutual reception to Jupiter, that's that's quite a fortunate relationship between the two planets. Moon and Jupiter are in each other's sign, and that might say something about the people around you. Partners, close friends. It seems they're honourable, and you shouldn't underestimate them. And so, on Sunday, don't be too stubborn, and be open to alternative possibilities. And you haven't got all the answers, and maybe you can trust another person to sort of help move things along, and that becomes particularly and clear later on Sunday, when the moon starts making a moon makes a trine to Mercury. So making a trine to Mercury, in fact, it's part of a grand trine. Moon trine Mercury, moon trine Saturn, sort of Mercury is kind of vaguely trine Saturn, and so that perhaps allows a relationship, or perhaps several relationships, to surprise you, and to surprise you on the upside. Cancer. It's not a bad weekend, and one of the reasons it's not a bad weekend is because the moon is fairly well placed. So on Saturday it's well placed from a Cancerian perspective, and on Sunday it's just well placed in general. So what do I mean by that? So on Saturday, moon's in Scorpio, a water sign. It's a sign that has a natural compatibility with you, Cancer, and the moon in Scorpio is making a sextile to Mars. And it doesn't really matter if you're a Scorpio, if the moon, when the moon is in Scorpio, the moon might be fallen in Scorpio, but it doesn't bother you usually. And so with the moon in Scorpio, you have an opportunity to really to be quite sort of creative, and to be very clear in yourself about what is important. The moon is applying to a sextile of Mars, and so with moon sextile Mars, you have no problems looking after yourself, and at the same time you can advocate for your best interests. So if there's something you want to do, Cancer, then you can do it. You're going to be taken seriously, and if you need to argue your case, really that shouldn't be a problem. So don't keep quiet. Especially if things are happening that you don't necessarily approve of, and you'd rather be doing something else. Well, just be open about your true feelings. Tell people how you'd like things to be, and I think that in most cases, they will listen. And then the moon changes sign. It could quite when the moon changes sign. It could change sign as early as sort of 11 p.m. or even earlier if you're in 11 p.m. in California, even earlier if you're in Alaska or Hawaii, and then if you're that would be sort of 2 a.m. on Sunday. If you're in New York, that'd be 7 a.m. on Sunday. If you're in the UK, and then perhaps sort of late afternoon, early evening if you're in Australasia. So Sunday, the moon moving into Sagittarius, that's good. And the reason it's good is because the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. You've got Jupiter moving through your sign, and this is one of the advantages of having Jupiter being in your sign. It does mean that every time the moon is in Sagittarius, and every time the moon is in Pisces, so 2 of the 12 signs, every time that happens, the moon is in mutual reception by sign with Jupiter. And so that does mean that while Jupiter is in Cancer until June of next year, you're going to be lucky. You could argue that right now, all things being equal, Cancer is the luckiest of the 12 signs, and it's going to stay like that. Now, I say all things being equal, you've got to look at your individual charts, but you should be happy with the way things are. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, that does allow you to really get yourself together. And you might have to worry about an opposition between the moon and Uranus, but you can handle it. So if there are some distractions and disturbances, it's not a big problem. You'll be able to make sense of it. You'll be able to assert yourself, and with the moon in mutual reception to Jupiter, you can just have an idea about how you'd like things to be arranged, and additionally, you can look after your own interests, and interests. It's not just sort of material interests. You've got to think about your health and well-being when the moon is in Sagittarius, and that's important to everyone. And so if recently you've been sort of feeling under the weather, or perhaps you're de-energized, it's all been rather exhausting, and with moon moving into Sagittarius, you can change things, and you can put things back on a firm footing. And additionally, you can take a situation which appeared complicated, that appeared worrying, and you can actually start to make sense of it. And that is because the moon is making as it moves into Sagittarius, it makes a trine to Saturn and Neptune, and it just could be Cancer, that there is something that you're worried about. And it's not personal. It shouldn't be personal. It's about what's happening out there. Saturn Neptune conjunction. We're all being influenced by this Saturn Neptune conjunction. So you can take something that you're worried about, and you can just have another look at it. And so that's perhaps what the moon's trine is all about. You can have another look at it and realize that it's not a problem. In fact, it may be something that you can use, because, remember, where there's a fear, particularly if it's a general fear, there is often an opportunity. Leo, at first, you're reluctant. You're not entirely convinced that you want to do anything. It is the weekend, isn't it? And so you just perhaps want to be left alone, or you just want to do things your way, and you probably have good reason for taking this approach. It just could all have got a bit too much, and so that might say something about Saturday. And while it's okay to do nothing or very little, that doesn't mean to say that you can't be doing something. And there is a sextile between the moon and Mars building up over the course of Saturday, and this moon sextile Mars, I would not have regarded it as being especially exciting, but it does allow you to sort of get things together, and to decide what is important, and there might be a material dimension to this moon sextile Mars. So if there's something bothering you of a material nature, it could be money, it could be something organizational, or some way of protecting yourself in a financial sense. If there's something like that, or worrying about who owes, maybe someone owes money, maybe you owe money, or someone owes money to you, or if it's just some financial irritation that might be a distraction for you, then with this moon sextile Mars, I do think that there's something you can do about it. And so if you need to address a financial issue, and especially even if another person is involved, you can do it. And in fact, Leo, your people skills aren't too bad this weekend. Both on Saturday and Sunday. So if you need to talk to someone, don't be shy, because you'll get it right, and you'll be able to make the right connection. And if you need to discuss some subject that may be rather boring, or it could be serious, but if you need to discuss it, then I think you are going to be able to. And then later in the weekend, the moon changes sign. The moon moves into Sagittarius. And when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a grand trine in fire signs, really, because the moon moves into Sagittarius, and then it makes a trine to Saturn and Neptune, and then it makes a trine to Mercury. So later in the weekend, things do start to move, and you feel more confident, more confident about your abilities, and you're not so reticent. And so if there's something you want to talk about, you want to bring it out in the open, you want to enjoy yourself, it shouldn't be a problem. And it's not, though, about making anyone happy. That's not what it's about. It's about doing things that really you enjoy, that you find to be satisfying. And if other people are on your wavelength, that would be great. And additionally, Leo, there might be the start of a realization. And we do have the moon making a trine to Saturn and Neptune, and one of the big problems that all of us have, regardless of our sign, is this Saturn-Neptune conjunction and what it means to us. And Saturn-Neptune conjunctions can be about fear, the fear of the unknown. We at some level want to be part of something larger than ourselves, but if we become part of something larger than ourselves, we lose everything, or at least we could lose everything. We lose our boundaries, we lose our ego. And so it is threatening. And with moon trine Saturn, moon trine Neptune, you might sort of have an understanding of it, and this understanding could have a spiritual dimension. And, remember, Saturn and Neptune are in Aries. Aries, from a Leo perspective, is quite a spiritual sign, and so perhaps with Moon aspecting Saturn and Neptune, you can start to tune into something. You've been trying to tune into it, but maybe the Moon is going to help you out. Here in this particular department. And so don't forget your spirituality, and listen to the signals, listen to the messages. They come in all sorts of forms. They could be coincidences, or apparent coincidence, or it just could be your dreams. Virgo, Mars is still in your sign, and it doesn't leave Virgo for about a week, and so it's not such a bad thing having Mars in your sign. I mean, it's quite motivating. It allows you to get things together, and so if there's something you're trying to get together and you perhaps need to use a bit of force, then now might be the right time to do it. While Mars is still in Virgo. I mean, when does Mars move into Libra? I mean, that is a good question. So Mars moves into Libra on the 6th or the 7th. So that's pretty soon. In less than a week, Mars moves into Libra. So this weekend, think about it. Think what actually needs to be done. And I'm thinking particularly about Saturday, because on Saturday there is a sextile aspect between the moon and Mars. And this moon-Mars sextile does allow you to speak your mind. And people are going to listen, and you'll know what to say. You'll know which details you need to concentrate on, and which details are irrelevant. I mean, don't scatter your energy. I mean, with moon sextile Mars, discipline is required. Now, I think the sextile itself can create discipline, because the sextile aspect is not like a trine. I mean, a trine aspect can just be too easy. A sextile does have a hard edge. Remember, a sextile is about sixness, 2 times 3. But 2 is about the opposition. It's about conflict. I mean, 3 is about ease. But so there is some dynamic tension in that moon sextile Mars, and it is because of that dynamic tension that you can concentrate on what matters, and on the details that matter. And so that might sort of tell you something about what Saturday is about. And Saturday, do work on yourself on Saturday. Some things may not be natural, or rather, they may not be especially spontaneous. So you have to put the work in. So if you want to do something of value, it may not be natural. It may not be the first thing that comes to mind. But if you work on it, and you work on yourself on Saturday, and into Sunday as well, you will find in the end that you find the right, that you're adopting the right approach, and that your overall approach is going to be pretty constructive. Then the moon does change signs, and this does make me think that Sunday could be a rather different day from Saturday. I think that on Sunday you might sort of value your privacy more than on Saturday. So if you've got anything important to do, particularly of a social nature, it's probably best to get it done on Saturday. By Sunday, you are going to want to be slowing down. You're going to want to slow down, and Sunday does see the moon making an opposition to Uranus. That the moon opposition Uranus might be unsettling. It represents something that does bother you. You should be attending to it at some stage, but do you have to attend to it right now? And the answer is probably no. And probably the best way of dealing with Sunday is really to do not very much. At least not in a social sense. There's no one you have to be with, and it might be best if you just focus on what's important to you. And the last aspect of the weekend is a trine between the moon and Mercury. That's a great aspect, but it's an aspect that kind of takes place behind closed doors. It's about you thinking things through, getting perspective. And getting perspective does matter for Virgos, because Mercury, your ruler, has been under a lot of pressure recently. It's still retrograde, it's still close to the sun, but Mercury is not quite as close to the sun as it used to be. It's now about 4 degrees, 3 or 4 degrees from the sun. So you are getting some objectivity here, and with the moon making a trine to Mercury, finally things are starting to make sense, and you can understand what's important and what is trivial. And if you really want to make sense of everything, it's just important that you do things in your own way without being disturbed. If you've got a lot of people around you, people telling you this and telling you that, well, that just could be a distraction. But I am thinking, by the end of a weekend, things will be starting to make a lot more sense. Libra, you don't always feel sort of entirely easy about things. There's something just bothering you, especially on Saturday, and you would just like to be yourself and not have to worry about too much, and that's the way you'd like it to be. But there's something there, and you're just wondering, what exactly is it about, and it may even be that something is popping the bubble of complacency, and what it might be is you feeling that you're not doing everything you could be doing, and that you're clever, you've got opportunities, there are possibilities, but some of these possibilities you just might be aware that you're allowing them to pass you by, and so allow yourself to be challenged. And if you have worries that you're not doing something, then take these worries seriously. Don't just allow time to pass you by. Just try to think about what it is that you're supposed to be doing. I mean, when I say supposed to be doing, we're not talking about anything that's being imposed upon you from the outside, or me imposing it on you, me just coming up with some random astrological thought and just telling you that you need to worry about something. It's not about that. It's just about you recognizing that things have changed, and because things have changed, you have a new set of obligations, an obligation to yourself, not to anyone else. And this might feed into your attitude, for example, to what your ambitions are. It's okay to have ambitions. In fact, you absolutely should have ambitions. With Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. But just because you have ambitions, you can't have any ambition. You've got to have an ambition which is right for you, and that might be part of your uncertainty. Your ambitions need to be refined and restructured, and you might, if you're honest with yourself, if you're really honest with yourself, realize that there's a particular direction you really want to go in, and you perhaps in the past have been in denial about it, but now it's clear there is something extra that you feel that you want to do, that indeed you must do. Now, as far as general comfort is concerned and happiness, and probably Sunday is going to be an easier day than Saturday. And the reason for that is that the moon will be in Sagittarius, and there's a grand trine in fire signs. Just about. I mean, the moon is making a trine to Saturn, it's making a trine to Neptune, moon in Sagittarius, that is, and then because Saturn and Neptune are in Aries, and then by the end of the weekend the moon makes a trine to Mercury. And this grand trine, from your perspective, can be very satisfying. Things start to move. You find it easier to for example, tell people what's on your mind, and some things you might have been keeping to yourself, but now you don't have to keep it to yourself, and you can be honest about the way you feel. And additionally, there may have been things that in the past you had found to be quite difficult to verbalize, but now maybe you're getting that chance. And this may link back to what I was saying about what are your real ambitions, what should your real ambitions be, and maybe on Sunday you can start to verbalize them, to other people, but also verbalize them to yourself, because self-verbalization does matter. Because if you can put something into words, particularly if you're an air sign, that really does help. It does really help you to make progress. So Libra, it's a weekend that has twists and turns. I think that Sunday is going to probably be a better day than Saturday, but you're always keeping in mind, where you're going to and how you define that ultimate destination, and because the path to that destination is always changing, and the destination itself maybe doesn't need to change, but it needs to be enhanced. and you need to think about all the things that are possible, and don't forget Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. As I think I said in my Friday horoscope, I think that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is a really great aspect, and so you've got time, over a week before that Venus-Jupiter conjunction becomes exact, to really think about how you're going to make the most of it. And it does, I think, link to your ambitions. Ambitions do matter. It's important, Libra, to be ambitious. Not just this weekend, but arguably for the whole year, while Jupiter is moving through Cancer. Scorpio. On Saturday, the moon continues its movement through your star sign, and while moving through Scorpio, the moon is making a sextile to Mars. So that's pretty straightforward. It's straightforwardly saying that you have a fair amount of power at your disposal, and you're in a position where you can assert yourself, where you can make things happen. If there's something that you're not happy about, you can change it. If there's something you want, perhaps there's some new opportunity that you're becoming aware of, you can make progress. And it's important that you're not shy, and you're certainly not shy about your aims and your hopes, your wishes. So be honest about that, and don't assume that you're going to be ignored, that people aren't interested in what you have to say. They're very interested in what you have to say. And so you do make the most of the moon moving through Scorpio, and you should be thinking perhaps about how you want things to change by the end of Saturday, because that's what Saturday is about. It is a moon and Scorpio time for you, and if you're socializing on Saturday, I think that it should run pretty well. You can move things in your way. You can move conversations in your way. You can, if there's anyone you need to sort of interact with, you can do it. You can be very effective about it. And at the same time, Scorpio, part of your effectiveness is giving the impression that you don't care. Even if you do care, you probably do really care. So, however desperately you want something, you're able to get it by giving the impression that you couldn't care less. The moment you show that you really do care, of course, that spoils things, because as soon as you come over as being desperate, then all sorts of problems start to arise. But you don't have to show any desperation. I mean, even if you do feel desperate, that sense of objectivity and detachment can really work in your favour. Then the moon does eventually leave Scorpio, and it moves into Sagittarius. And so when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it does make oppositions to sort of an opposition to Uranus, and it makes aspects to some of the outer planets, to sort of Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. And with the moon in Sagittarius, on one level, you probably start to slow down. And one reason you might want to slow down is, or why you might slow down, is because you just don't have the energy. I mean, not in a bad way. You've expended your energy, you've done a good job, but Sunday, it's a day of rest, isn't it? But additionally, you just might be just aware that things are complicated, and do you really need to get involved with something that is complicated? And the answer, may be no. And instead, you just want to make things simple, make things easier, make things comprehensible. And so, if you want to make things easier, well, the best approach, may be to sort of stay out of trouble and not ask too many questions. The problem with asking questions, on Sunday, is you might get an answer. And in a way, that's the last thing you want, because if you get an answer, then you've got to respond to that answer. And that answer might force you to do things that you don't really want to do. And that especially applies to anything to do with money. So if you want to know the truth about money and you want to find out what's really going on, yeah, you can find the truth. But then what do you do? Well, yeah, you have to go and do something. And so you might take the view that on Sunday it's best not to ask, and because as soon as you become aware of something, well, then the obsession starts kicking in, and so perhaps you should just let things be and not stir things up unless you really have to. Sagittarius. The moon does move into Sagittarius this weekend. It's mainly a feature of Sunday. Okay, if very late on Saturday, it's possible that the moon, if you're in the Americas, then if you're in California or even further west than that, then the moon moves into Sagittarius then. But for most of us, the moon doesn't move into Sagittarius until Sunday, and so that means that there isn't any immediate hurry to make things happen, to be larger than life. That this might happen when the moon is in Sagittarius. So on Saturday you got the moon in Scorpio, and the moon in Scorpio is making a sextile to Mars, and that moon Mars sextile, I would have said, was rather understated. It's not necessarily asking you or demanding that you do anything, but you might nonetheless want to take some action anyway. And the kind of action we're talking about is probably something quite low profile. It might nonetheless be important. It could be, for example, that it's something hanging over from the working week, or something you were involved in on Friday that you want to finish off. And so moon sextile Mars gives you the chance to sort it out, and it could relate to your own perfectionism. I mean, perfectionism is not a word that one normally associates with Sagittarius. I mean, Sagittarians can certainly be perfectionists, as can any of the 12 signs. But, with Mars moving through late Virgo, that perfectionist streak in you, again, the perfectionist streak that we all have, does perhaps is coming out into the open. And so there's something you want to finish off. You want to make sure that it's as perfect as is possible. And so that would be a constructive way of using the moon Mars sextile. And then the moon changes sign and it moves into Sagittarius. And so you could say that when the moon moves into Sagittarius, that's when the weekend takes off. And the moon in Sagittarius, it's good news. I mean, it's not just because the moon is moving into your sign. It's also because the moon is making a mutual reception to Jupiter, and of course Jupiter is your ruler. So the moon is in Jupiter's sign, Jupiter is in the moon sign. They're in mutual reception. That means the moon and Jupiter give each other dignity. And so on Sunday you become literally dignified. And if you've got dignity, you don't have to make a fuss. You don't have to make a special effort to get attention. You are. Your dignity is obvious. Your ability and your everything positive about yourself is plain to see. And so do take advantage of it. And it's not just that. We've got a grand trine in fire signs. The moon makes a sextile. Moon in Sagittarius makes a sextile, makes a trine to Saturn and Neptune, and then the last aspect of Sunday is a trine to Mercury. So Sunday, things do take off. They can take off, and you can be in perhaps lots of places at once, but also you will have the discipline to make the right choices, because you've got Moon trine Saturn, and in the process you might sort of understand something, Sagittarius, that in the past had just been really difficult to get your head around. You just hadn't got it, and it, perhaps over the last month, and it had been worrying you, and you weren't quite sure what to do about it, and now it starts to make sense. And it doesn't just make sense to you. I think it starting to make sense to everyone else, and the people around you, the people you might share your life with. It's starting to make sense, and because there's a lot of energy around on Sunday, then you can start to interact and start sharing your ideas and start listening to what other people have got to say. And maybe a person who in the recent past had been under the weather, they hadn't fully been able to express themselves, with Moon making a trine to Mercury, suddenly they're becoming more forthcoming. And so you may be getting answers which in the past had been denied to you, and that is because people are able to be more honest. And how are they able to be more honest? Well, that says something about you, and the fact that you can be a really sort of motivating force, and you're a person that can create create communications, and you can create structure, and just a sense that everything is in order, but it's also happening, and it can also be exciting. Capricorn, I think it can be quite a good weekend, although probably Saturday and Sunday are 2 days which may be quite different to one another. In terms of you being an active player, perhaps being an extrovert. I'm not saying you are an extrovert, but perhaps you can be more extroverted than usual at times during the weekend, and that would be on Saturday. Saturday does seem for you to be more active than Sunday, and on Saturday, I think that your ability to get on with people is going to be pretty good. You know what people want. You know how to relate, and you can relate to people at every level. You can relate to them as individuals. You can relate to them as a group, and you can relate to the whole world. You understand what's happening in this world, and you understand the pressures and tensions that people are experiencing. And so this means on Saturday that everything you say and do has a degree of importance and significance, and you're going to be able to explain yourself very well, and also communicate some kind of vision. I mean, it's not a sort of pie in the sky vision. It's a very real vision. It's a vision that is tinged with realism. You're not going to want to work with something that is impossible, but you certainly have an idea about the way things could manifest. And visions take many forms. You can have a vision which is very positive, everyone being happier, working together, for example. But you can have alternative visions. You can have a vision of something which isn't so nice, and a vision can perhaps become a threat. For example, you give people a vision of the future, and this vision of the future may not be great, and you're saying, well, this can happen if you don't do A, B, and C. And if you have that kind of vision, don't be shy about it. Your job, Capricorn, is not to make people feel easy about themselves, to be reassuring. That's not your job. At least on Saturday, that's not your job. It's to actually point out what matters, and if you make the effort, there'll be something about you that really comes over as being, quite insistent. And I think that people are going to be open to your message, whatever that message is, and realism is certainly part of it. But you can only take things too far. You can only take things so far, and there comes a point where you keep talking, you keep explaining, and in the end, people perhaps are overloaded, and they stop listening, and that point may be reached as Saturday turns to Sunday, as the moon moves into Sagittarius, and that the moon moving into Sagittarius. It does make things more personal. It's not necessarily about just you and other people. You perhaps have to now go back into reflection mode. And when the moon, it does make, moon in Sagittarius does make a trine to Saturn, and it makes a trine to Mercury. You've got a grand trine in fire signs, but I think in many cases that is personal, and it's about you working things out and having your own thoughts and your own realizations. And there's still a vision there, but that vision may no longer be shareable, because you're starting to see new dimensions, and the moon does make an opposition to Uranus. So there's a surprise with that moon opposition Uranus. And where that surprise lies, I'm not sure. It kind of depends, and it might be a realization you have, or you might see someone behaving in a particular way, and that might give you pause for thought. But then the moon does make a trine to Saturn, and although Sunday is a relatively low-profile day, that moon trine Saturn could be helpful as far as certain relationships are concerned. Certain people who may be important to you with a moon trine Saturn, and then the moon making a trine to Mercury. So that can be communicative, but in a very personal kind of way. It's not like you communicating with the world at large. Moon trine Saturn, moon trine Mercury is about you communicating with people who you already understand, who you already have a good relationship with, and things become clear, and everyone starts to understand each other. So you just have to make the most of the energies and use the energies and be aware of how they are changing. And so that's why I'm suggesting Saturday is more of an active day, where you can more be aligned to the world around you, whereas Sunday you might want to sort of fall back onto things that you're familiar with, and also people that you're familiar with. Aquarius. You have a strong influence over the course of a weekend. I think that people are going to listen to you, and they are going to take note of your suggestions and your views. And so don't hold back, and that applies both to Saturday and Sunday. Now, as far as Saturday is concerned, perhaps on Saturday you're going to be sort of more single-minded. You may feel on Saturday that there are things that you want to do, and you don't want to compromise them. So on Saturday, if you feel that something is important, then get going on it, and don't worry too much about the impact you're having on others. People will understand. If you need other people's cooperation on Saturday, I think that you should have no difficulty getting it. I think that there'll be something about you that is very insistent, and people will just take note of what you're doing. And if you ask them to do something, why should they refuse? I mean, you'll have a good reason, and you'll be able to explain why certain things are important. And in general, over the weekend, Aquarius, you just know how to project yourself in a way that other people are sympathetic to. So don't be afraid of being open, about yourself and your ambitions, and also explain what is important to you and why is it important to you. And I think that, people will understand. So Saturday, yeah, you are quite insistent, and you could be quite intense. I think Sunday, perhaps things get easier. The moon moves out of Scorpio, it moves into Sagittarius, and with the moon in Sagittarius, you can sort of be more friendly and perhaps more relaxed, and you won't be quite so goal orientated as you were on Saturday. And so, as Sunday progresses, it does seem that you start to relax. So one of the first aspects that takes place as the moon moves into Sagittarius is a trine to Saturn, and so that trine between the moon and Saturn could allow you to be relatively sociable and sort of easygoing, and you won't be quite so obsessed with your own agenda. And so if you need to socialize on late Saturday if you're in the Americas, late Saturday, very late Saturday, certainly on Sunday, I would have thought that Aquarius, your social skills are going to be quite good. And then this grand trine in fire signs starts to kick off. So moon makes a trine to Saturn, trine to Neptune, makes a trine to Mercury, and so you're able to talk about many different subjects, and your ability to talk just gets better and better as Sunday progresses. And through conversation, you can impress people, and you can get people to open up, and people will be just happy to have you around. And all the while you are expressing your power, and so you can be definite, and you certainly don't have to be shy about what is important to you. And that applies both to Saturday and Sunday. And so by the end of a weekend, when the moon is making a trine to Mercury, it does seem whoever is around you over the weekend, there won't be any conflict. And there might be been conflict sort of earlier on, but through a free flow of communication and ideas, there can be a sense of togetherness and perhaps even harmony. Pisces, maybe we can say that Saturday is more about other people and their interests, what they've got to say, what they've got to contribute, and Sunday is more about you. And so as far as Saturday is concerned, we've got the moon making a sextile to Mars. Mars is in Virgo, Mars is in your opposite sign, and so with moon sextile Mars, that might indicate that people have quite a lot to contribute, or at least they feel they've got a lot to contribute. And so perhaps Pisces, you should just let them get on with it. Mars is not going to be in Virgo for much longer. In less than a week, Mars will be out of Virgo and into Libra, and that might be a bit of a relief for you. Perhaps certain people who had had a lot of influence on you, had maybe been bothering you, they could sort of fade into the background, but right now, I would have said, let people have their say, and that doesn't mean to say that what they're saying can be disregarded. You can be open to all possibilities, and you can respond, but I don't think that you necessarily have to act. You don't have to initiate, and that might mean that it's going to maybe be quite a relaxing Saturday. It could be a relaxing Saturday. In fact, you could say that the more effort you put in, the more you try to assert yourself on Saturday, well, the more difficult it will be. And additionally, you might be wasting opportunities. you have to think about what are people suggesting, and what are their plans, and listen, and perhaps learn. And that doesn't mean to say that you have to follow another person's plan. It's always good to know what other people are up to. And being a Pisces, there's always room for reflection and observation. And so if you can do that on Saturday, and yet let others take the initiative, it just might be easier. But never forget your own key interests or your core interests. They do matter. And then there is a change. The moon moves out of Scorpio, and it moves into Sagittarius. So Saturday, Sunday, moon will be in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is an important sign if you're a Pisces, and it is about you, and it's about what you are trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. And the moon in Sagittarius, it makes a grand trine. It makes between Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and then there's Mercury in Leo, and so the moon is aspecting those three planets, also making an opposition to Uranus. But with that grand trine, it's in its high energy, and you can use this energy to work out what you want to do and decide what your best options are. And additionally, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a mutual reception to Jupiter. So the moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs, and of course Jupiter is your ruler. So moon moving into Sagittarius just gives you natural strength, and what matters, what to do. And so Sunday, for many Pisces, maybe the start of a new week. I don't know when a week starts. Some people say it starts on Monday. Some people say it starts on Sunday. But you could say, Pisces, that your week really starts on Sunday. On Sunday, you're ready to make commitments, and you're able to embark on something new. And the moon making a trine to Saturn is about structure. It's about making something real, and it could also be about confronting some of your fears, something you thought was going to hold you back. Could be money, for example. You might realize that it may not be such a problem after all, that things needn't be expensive, money needn't be a barrier, because if something is important to you, then it's yours anyway. Money can't stop you from achieving what is essentially you. I mean, that's something that is really important to realize. And as far as relationships are concerned, Mercury is connected to you and relationships, because Mercury rules Virgo, your opposite sign. And so Mercury's been under a lot of pressure recently. Mercury's been retrograde, it's been conjunct the Sun, and now Mercury is, it's still retrograde, but it's moving away from the conjunction of the Sun, and the moon is now making in mutual reception to Jupiter, is making a trine to Mercury. And so on Sunday, probably late on Sunday, even into Monday, things might start to connect in a way that they hadn't done before, and maybe someone who you thought was not particularly useful, they weren't being very clear, they seemed confused, there might be an increased level of clarity, and through conversation, things can clarify. So from a relationship perspective, I think that the weekend can end on quite a fortunate note. And those are my forecasts of the 12 signs, and it's now time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 26, the taming power of the great. And this hexagram seems to come up quite a lot. And the taming power of the great, something needs to be tamed. Now, the great might be us. It might be all the things that we're trying to do. We might be aware that we've got perhaps a huge amount of power, or we believe we've got a huge amount of power, and we want to do something with it. And then you've got the taming power. What is the taming power? We need to have some discipline. However much power we've got, we don't want to use it all at once. We don't want to exhaust ourselves, and we certainly don't want to do something that is dangerous or inappropriate. And this hexagram, there are 4 moving lines. So if you've got 4 moving lines here, regardless of what the hexagram is, that suggests there is a lot of action. Things are happening, and we maybe move from one drama to the next. And if we follow those moving lines through, we're aware of our power. We feel we can do stuff this weekend, but the bottom hexagram moves, and with the bottom hexagram moving, that is indicating that we have to be careful. There is a danger here, but if we go ploughing ahead, we might get ourselves into trouble. And so, don't just act without thinking. But that doesn't mean to say that you should do nothing. The third line moves, and the third line moves. The advice with the third line moving is, it is dangerous, but you can find a path through. You can use this power, but you've got to use it responsibly, and you've just got to perhaps follow whatever your guiding light is. And in fact, the hexagram, I think it talks about a horse, a horse that knows where it's going, and maybe the horse represents something that we are part of, but something that is taking us to wherever we want to go, and it might be our guiding spirit. And if we trust the good judgment of our guiding spirit, we should be fine. And then the fifth line moves, and you just be focused, be controlled. Discipline again matters all the way through, and then at the end, top line moves, and the top line suggests that in the end we get there, we get to where we want to go. It's quite a heavenly line. So the taming power of the great, although it might sound rather boring, in this case, with all those moving lines, it suggests that, with the right approach, being cautious, but also understanding that we do have a mission, that's something we do need to achieve. In the end, we can get there. And then the process continues. And with 4 moving lines, that means that we morph into a second hexagram, and we morph into hexagram number 29, which is the abysmal. And it's kind of more of the same, because the previous hexagram was cautioning us left, right, and centre. It was telling us to be careful how we do it, be disciplined, to really harness our power, but to do it in a responsible way. And the abysmal is just reminding us that it's a dangerous situation. If we're not careful, we could fall into the abyss. I sort of imagine it like a path through, with a abyss to the left, abyss to the right, But if we stick to the path, and it's not a situation that's unfamiliar. We've been through it before, and so we know what to do. It's about being natural about it. The abyss obviously is a hexagram which is very much connected with water, and so water must be allowed to flow in its own way. It needs to follow gravity, and if we follow gravity and if we follow the natural path, we are going to be okay, and we will reach our destination safe and sound. And finally, my apologies, I kind of said I wouldn't talk about Meghan until the autumn. It's not quite the autumn. I mean, it does feel like autumn, kind of. It sort of feels like late summer. I mean, I know it's the 2nd of August. In fact, I'm making this recording on the 1st of August. It just feels like it's all coming to an end. So I think it's okay to talk about Meghan, particularly as it's her birthday on Monday. I mean, that wouldn't be very nice not to talk about her on her birthday. and she likes attention. If it's the right kind of attention. And Meghan, she has been, I won't say in the news, but certainly in terms of YouTube channels, there's been a sort of an uptick in activity regarding Meghan. I mean, a lot of people sort of gloating about the fact that she's supposedly losing this the Netflix deal, or endless speculation about her and her marriage. And additionally, there was this comment which a lot of YouTube channels picked up on regarding her and Martha Stewart. Again, as you know, if you've been watching these videos for long enough, I'm not really into celebrities, and I really couldn't care less. But my interest is the astrology, and people like Martha Stewart and Meghan, most people have heard of. I don't have to explain who they are. I mean, that's the advantage of these people. If I were to talk about some sort of obscure politician, I'd have to explain who this person is. And fundamentally, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to explain an astrological principle. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see astrology at work. It's important to me. I want astrology to show itself, and so here's Meghan's chart. I mean, this is a chart, but it's also good to just look at a chart and to really get into a chart. And so there was this other thing about Martha Stewart, is that Martha Stewart said something about Meghan. She said, I think I've quoted this, she said, Meghan, I don't really know very well, and I hope she knows what she's talking about. Stewart told Yahoo Lifestyle earlier this week of Markle's brand, which is known for raspberry spreads, teas, limited edition wildflower honey, and edible flowers. Then Martha Stewart went on to say, authenticity to me is everything, and to be authentic and knowledgeable about your subject matter is extremely important. So there is a hint there that Martha Stewart is questioning Meghan Markle's authenticity, and particularly in the context of Meghan Markle perhaps trying to have all these lifestyle brands and perhaps trying to be the new Martha Stewart. Now, why is this relevant astrologically? And it's very relevant astrologically. It's very interesting astrologically. And the reason is absolutely obvious. Meghan Markle was born on August the 4th, 1981. Martha Stewart was born on August the 3rd, 1941. So Martha Stewart is 40 years and 1 day older than Meghan. And this absolutely relates to Meghan's sun, because Martha Stewart has her sun at 11 degrees Leo, and of course Meghan has her sun at 12 degrees Leo. So from a synastry point of view, there's a sun-sun connection here. And if we do a synastry between Martha Stewart and Meghan, you can see that they've got their suns only just around 1 degree apart, and they both got Venus in Virgo. I mean, Martha Stewart's Venus in Virgo is 4 degrees, just 4 degrees off Meghan's Venus in Virgo. So Venus in Virgo, you can see Venus in Virgo as being about everything needing to be right, sort of lifestyle, cooking tips, everything else that Martha Stewart is into. That's very Venus in Virgo. I mean, sometimes one is negative about Venus in Virgo, but if you want to use Venus in Virgo in the right kind of way, just getting the domestic details right, is important. So perhaps it's not surprising that Meghan, wants to be Martha Stewart. I think it's real. I mean, I think that is a real suggestion. Now, I don't know about the details. I don't know about lifestyle brand. I don't know about this. I'm just trying to focus on the astrology here. And one of the absolute essential things about Meghan's son is that it's a problem. It absolutely has to be a problem, Meghan's son. And why do I think it's a problem? Well, the sun can burn everything up. I mean, it really can. Especially it's in Leo, and there are lots of women who've got sun in Leo who are very, very successful, like Martha Stewart, for example, or Madonna, and others. Those are ones that sort of I can think of at the moment. And so I think Liz Truss is a Leo. I mean, she got to be Prime Minister, but not for very long, though. Sun in Leo is an interesting planet in a woman's chart because it is potentially projectable. And the question is, to what extent does it have to be owned? And with Meghan, I think it just, as I said before, I think it would be better if it were to be projected. If she perhaps if she had found a man who embodied the Sun in Leo principles. I don't think Harry does. I mean, Harry is represented by her Mars in Cancer in the 12th house. There's Harry, the military man in the 12th house. Mars is fallen, a man who is quite sort of moody and emotional. And so that's who she's picked up on. I mean, of course, Meghan was born at night. And so a woman who's born at night Mars is likely to represent the man she eventually spends time with. If she was born in by the day, if she was born, if she had been born with Leo rising, with the sun above the horizon, then I think it would have been easier for her to make the right connection and to find a man who, maybe to find her billionaire. But she was born with Cancer rising, rather than with Leo rising. And talking about Cancer rising, look how Martha Stewart's Mercury is at 25 Cancer, right on Meghan's ascendant, and so it's like she's just very aware of sort of Martha Stewart and kind of, you can see how she might want to be Martha Stewart. And certainly it is that sun on the connection, or sun conjunct sun. So there's almost a weird kind of projection. So, she takes the celebrity out there. And of course you could say, well, Harry is a celebrity. So she takes this celebrity and kind of wants to copy, wants to be that person. So I think that does matter. But you're getting some pushback. I mean, notice the Pluto, Martha Stewart's Pluto, 4 degrees 7 minutes Leo is that represents her generation, someone born in the early 40s. So as a representative of that generation, and also she's got Pluto conjunct Chiron, and that Pluto is right on Meghan's Mercury. So there is perhaps a point of obsession from Meghan's perspective, but also feeling the heaviness of that generation, and feeling a heaviness of that representative of that generation. So if Martha Stewart makes this implied criticism of Meghan, suggesting maybe she's not being authentic, and that does seem to be a very real and very powerful criticism. And the lack of authenticity, I think you can see why it might have become an issue recently, because of the new moon, which we had on the new moon. There was a new moon on July the 24th, and that new moon was at 2 degrees 8 minutes Leo. And you notice that Meghan has her North Node at 1 degree 39 Leo. So new moon on her Leo, on her North Node, on her Leo North Node. That kind of is activating her destiny point, if you like, what she should be. And if you've got North Node, well, particularly if you use a Placidus house cusps, if you're using a whole sign, if you're using whole signs, you'd say that her North Node was in the second house. But if you take Placidus, you'd say it was in the first house. I would be of the opinion that she has the North Node in the first house rather than the second house, by and large. I mean, you might disagree with me, but North Node in the first house is about doing things yourself. It's certainly about being authentic. It's not about copying it's not about copying someone else. It's getting into your own power and not deriving power from another person. And so you might say that having the new moon on her North Node is forcing her to think about this matter, and to think about what it means to be authentic and to be real, and to make her own decisions, and not to copy, not to sort of copy other people, try to be someone else, because that's not really going to work. And one thing that is puzzling, but puzzles me about Meghan. I mean, I regard Meghan's chart as it's such an interesting chart, and it just got so many lessons in it, and so many things to think about. And one of the fascinating things about Meghan's chart is its positivity. So if you take the 7 traditional planets, I mean, let's ignore Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. If you take the 7 traditional planets, then you can see that 5 of those traditional planets are in positive signs, i.e. they're air or fire or air. And you've just got Mars in Cancer and Venus in Virgo. And so, she's a really sort of a Leo, Libra person. And there is a certain bias here against, at least maybe it's just my bias. There's a bias against the water and the air signs. Maybe I'm doing this because I'm a Gemini. You kind of think that the air signs and the fire signs are just more exciting, more positive, more original. That might be a stereotype that you might have, and you might think that the water signs and the earth signs, they're less original. They just try to follow the crowd, But I don't think that's necessarily the case, and I think that Meghan's chart does sort of illustrate this, and this is a complicated issue that I perhaps need to think about some more. But there's so much positivity in Meghan's chart, I think, that it doesn't seem to be very original, and it doesn't seem to be authentic. And authenticity, perhaps, is about roots. You think about earth and emotion and being connected with something. So it's not really, so originality perhaps it's not the issue, but authentic, the word authentic and original, they're 2 very different words. Authentic is kind of a more passive word than original. Original is sort of a very positive idea, but the flip side of it is authentic, and authentic is grounded in something. And so it is negative. And I think that all of her fire and her air, lots of ideas, creating ideas out of nothing, in other people's ideas. It's all positive. Let's do this, let's do that, let's do that. But it's all inauthentic and it's unoriginal. And so that's how I'm kind of starting to think about it. Now, as far as what is going on in Meghan's life, I mean, we know what we're hearing. That obviously a lot of people can't stand her, and it doesn't look good. On the other hand, can we expect anything terrible to be happening to her? Well, I think we can see how things might develop. I mean, if you look at Meghan's chart, she's got a lot of stuff in Libra. I mean, she's got Moon in Libra. She's got Moon Saturn conjunction in Libra. She's got Jupiter in Libra, and so inevitably, Saturn and Neptune are going to make an opposition to her Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter, and it's going to happen quickly, all at once, and it could be quite devastating. But we do know that Saturn and Neptune have just gone retrograde, so they're backing off. So that opposition that opposition between Saturn and Neptune, hitting her Moon Saturn conjunction, that's not going to happen until next year. This year, you could say that maybe something is sort of giving her a break, and so perhaps we needn't be sort of immediately concerned about it. You could look at her Leo planets in terms of transits. She's survived Mars going through Leo just about, and now Mars is okay. Well, Mars, it's true that Mars is about to go into Libra, and so Mars going through Libra, could be a real issue for her. Mars is going to be opposition her Moon soon enough. I mean, when does Mars go into Libra? So Mars is that's pretty soon. I mean, so by the middle of this month, Mars will be opposition her Mars and the Saturn, and then Mars is going to be on her IC, and so that's something we can expect by the end of August. So from a Mars perspective, there are grounds for thinking that August, could be a really difficult month for her. And perhaps that Mars Saturn opposition at I think it's something like 1 degree Libra, plays 1 degree Aries, is going to have an effect on her Moon. But I don't think that Saturn and Neptune are really going to start working on her until next year, and perhaps a year after. So she has perhaps got some time to wait if you just look at it from a viewpoint of the transits. And I also looked at her solar return. So here's her solar return, because it's her birthday. I mean, it would be not very charitable not to look at her solar return on her birthday. So here's her solar return, and she does have the Sun-Mercury conjunction on her descendant. And so with the Sun and Mercury on a descendant, inevitably, that will turn to relationships. I mean, it must. And I'm not saying anything too catastrophic is going to happen between her and Harry. I mean, you think about it. I mean, you think that it's, people go on and on about them being about to divorce, but I've never been sort of entirely convinced about that scenario. Perhaps because they've got too much to lose by an immediate divorce. I mean, in different ways, and the Moon is trine the Sun, and so Moon trine Sun it's quite a fortunate aspect. Moon is in the 10th. It's trine the Sun in Leo. So, if I was sort of advising her, which I wouldn't be, of course, but if I were to be, there is some reason to be quite positive about that. And but Sun in Leo could represent her enemies as well. I mean, it does say something about relationships and sort of changing relationships, but I think maybe the Moon trine Sun is something of a saving grace there. I mean, Uranus is relatively close to the IC, so it's not necessarily going to be a great year. But I think perhaps for her, the real problems are going to come about next year. I mean, I kind of looked at her chart wanting to see something immediately dramatic. I don't see anything so dramatic. I think August is going to be a difficult month because of Mars, but I think that in terms of sort of larger things going on that might be quite difficult for her to deal with, then perhaps you need to look at next year. But I think the new moon that we just had really she should be thinking about that, because it does say something about, perhaps, about her originality and her authenticity. So, those are a few thoughts on Meghan. I'm sorry to bring her up again, but as I said, it is her birthday, so yeah, I think that's okay to comment on her chart as her. And I do wish her a happy birthday, and of course I also wish Martha Stewart a happy birthday, because on Sunday, she's going to be 84. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.